Hello, Neha. What's
Hey,
new in your
Mike.
world?
Not much. I've been enjoying relaxing in between things, and I've been looking forward to this podcast today. What about
I
you?
bought a new car, which is why we are doing this podcast later. Because when I was managed by Neha, her only flaw was being late to my one-on-ones, and now I was, I guess, 2 days late for a podcast, so I've sort of paid it back.
Yeah, you've like all of the I can get back at you cred that you've accumulated is back to zero, except I was late today anyway. So we're back to our tallies.
Yep, back in action. Well, today we were thinking we might talk about creating and keeping momentum on a team.
Yeah.
So, Neha, you've been really good at this. Like, what if you're coming into a team and say the team is kind of lacking in momentum right now, and you're like, we need to kind of create it, get it started? Like, what's your go-to methods for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I need to diagnose what the issue is, right? But the first thing that I'm always going to take a look at is like what the mission is and does everyone know what they need to do? So, do they know the work ahead of them? Do they know how to fit into that picture? And like, do they have any immediate concerns that they're bringing up? So, I'll listen to them first. And I always want to take a look at that mission. I want to look at like, okay, cool, how they're breaking it down and is realistic and achievable. I feel like you've seen that a lot, especially as you're going to different companies to see like, do you feel like every single time you go in that people do have like a real, like, what's the percentage of like places that have a realistic goal versus like needs to like shave down and cut scope?
Yeah, I think cutting scope, that's the big piece, right? Where it's like sometimes the goals can be realistic, but if they can't fit in your head, then people can just get a little bit confused or demotivated or whatever it may be, right? So the classic thing, and they always frame this towards this as being really important for juniors, but I feel like it's really important for everyone at any level, is like if you have an effort and you're like, okay, in a year we want X, right? Just go away in a hole and work on this for a year, then
Mm,
most
red
people
flag.
even exactly. Yeah, and red flag for like lots of reasons, I feel like. So one of them is okay, so what happens over the course of that year? Do you care or not care, right? Like if you want to get to that destination, and something I thought it was really good at GitHub, right? Sometimes as a result of the culture of if you had like a year-long project, if you didn't demonstrate anything that was visible to customers and usable by customers within generally like 3 months, then your project might just be killed, right? And then none of it gets
Yeah,
visible
yeah.
to
Real
customers.
consequences to like not being able
Exactly.
to do so. Yeah.
So as a result, like often a nice way of building that mission was like, okay, what's the smallest possible thing that we can get out to people that they will like and find useful? And even if it's not everyone, even if it's internal beta testers or external beta testers or whatever it may be, and then just avoid getting bogged down in that and just try and ship something small, iterate, improve, whatever. And then you can still decide that you don't actually release anything to anyone for a year. But then, like, along the way, if someone's like, what the hell have you people been doing for the last 3 months? And you can be like, well, look, you can see all this nice stuff and have all these nice demos. And if you want people to use this tomorrow, we can release it tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, like, actually, if I take a step back, what this is making me realize is that, like, okay, cool. Easy litmus test is to go to like 3 or 4 people on the team, ask them like what the goal is, what's next, and how will they know that they're successful, right? And so, as a leader coming in, right, like you want to create momentum, but you can't create momentum unless there's clarity first. So, you have to create clarity and then you want to create the momentum. And so, it's like we're trying to get that fundamental base layer. And as a leader, if I can just get everyone to say the goal the same way and say what's next to the same way and like know and internalize to the point that they can like rephrase it back to me about like how they'll know they'll be successful, we've like achieved step zero. And like then we can start building momentum, right? And sometimes that is literally as simple as repeating it over and over, except like, I think also it's important that like I feel like a lot of people are like, "Oh, I've told them 30 times. Why don't they get it?" At some point, it's you, and you, like, need to phrase it in a different way, and you need to try something differently, right? Like, placing the blame on the entire audience when you're, like, a single person, right? Like, you have to get more creative, and you have to, like, actually get curious as to, like, why people aren't repeating the same thing back.
Yeah. And I think on the repeating thing, it's sometimes, again, kind of like the cutting scope about being how can you make this statement or goal or whatever as short as possible?
Yes.
And if there's multiple goals, how can you have as few as possible? Right. Like the thing
Yes.
I always think
Yes.
about is like, I people who know me who may listen to this know that I spend a bunch of time in the gym. And like one of the classic things, if like you're teaching someone to, I don't know, squat, say, it's like if you say like, oh, you're doing these 86 things wrong, then they can't improve that because they can't think about 86 things at a time. So like what you notice with like good coaches around any sport is they're like, okay, or anything really, is like they're like, okay, here are the one, two, maybe three things if they're spaced out enough that are important to focus on right now. And
Yeah.
then when they've nailed those, then you can be like, let's move forward. And it may well be that you as the manager or leader or coach or whatever have a list of 86 things. And every time you like get through three, you're like, right, we're on to the next
Okay, cool.
three.
You've graduated to the next one.
Yeah.
Let's like keep going. Yeah.
Like the one I always think about, I remember when I was one of maybe my favorite software team ever when I worked on GitHub sponsors, and me and three other engineers, a PM and EM, a designer, basically. Like the thing that was so great about that is the kind of North Star of the plan that like we all knew we had a date. We were targeting, I think, GitHub Satellite, like GitHub's like European event. I can't remember what month of the year it was or whatever, but we were like maybe like 3-4 months out, right? And everyone on the team knew the high level goal was we're going to release this for individuals by that stage, right? And it
Yes.
also, I think the other nice thing about the North Star is the North Star, like it was obvious what it was, but it was also, we were very attuned to what it was not, right? So we were
Yes.
like
Anti
piggybacking,
goals.
exactly, piggybacking GitHub's billing system to begin with. Or it got spun out into its own billing system eventually, but like to begin with, it was like everything's going through GitHub billing. Everything's just individual to individual. We're not doing individual to organization, organization to individual. Like, and I feel like you could have probably got me 3 months away from that deadline, put me in a cave, not let me talk to the team at all. And I could have been productive for 3 months, right? I may not have built exactly the right thing, but I probably would have got like 50 to 75% of the way there. And
Yeah.
like, to me, like that's the sign when you have that level of like, it's very obvious what needs to be built and everyone has that complete understanding, then things just work so much better.
I mean, like, also, okay, so let's point out something like pretty, like a best practice, right? So, like, you had a scenario which was fixed timeline, variable scope, right? Or you get into a scenario where you have fixed scope, variable timeline. But, like, the reality of a lot of these teams is that they are being pressured to have fixed scope, fixed timeline, right? Or, and like, actually, technically, there's like four elements, I would say. There's scope, timeline, staffing, and expertise, right? You could add more people to it. You could swap the people with other people who are better suited to do so if you have a fixed scope and a fixed timeline. But when you get constrained on all of them, there's no hiring. You can't change the team around. Everyone else is like occupied on something else. Something has to give. And like as a leader, your job is to get the uppers to realize what has to give and figure out what it is so that you don't break the team. Because I guess the last element, the fifth element is a fixed number of hours in a week, and I don't want to touch that, right? Yeah,
Yep.
which
Well,
is kind of
I feel like,
staffing. Yeah.
yeah, the part of that as well that's kind of interesting is like, in my experience, the projects and bits of software or features or teams or whatever that I've worked on that have been the best have been the ones with usually often the most rigid of constraints, right? The
Yes.
ones
Yes.
where I did a talk slash blog post about this a few years ago where I called it like the best project, where I sort of like joked about, again, was thinking about a particular project at GitHub, which I won't name, that basically had infinite, like it was a really important top level priority, it had infinite resources buy-in or whatever, and as a result it got really badly fucked up multiple times because
Yeah.
there was not that like tight, okay, we've only got 4 people, we've only got 6 months, what can we do? Instead it was this like multi-year project involving very, very many people, and it's very easy, I think, to sleepwalk into disaster when you do that because
Yes.
you don't have that sense of like, well, we have to say no to like lots of these things, right?
Yeah. Constraints create creativity, right? And I generally feel like for most projects, starting small is like imperative, right? And so I've been in many scenarios where a leader has told me, hey, I'll give you the whole kitchen sink tomorrow. What do you need? And like I've had to push back and say, what we need is two people. And we need to start small. We need to discover because I'm not wasting everyone's time and especially getting bogged down in like coordination. We need to start small. We need to understand what we're doing and then we'll go from there, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So that's like the fundamental pillar. But then, like, I think the next one is like, okay, cool. How do you actually build that momentum? And like for me, I think that having really good milestones, very clear of what everyone's going to do. And it's not that like everyone has perfect lanes, right? In fact, something that could be clarifying is, hey, we have a backlog and everyone just picks up the next thing the next morning. Or I think you did this once with someone where it was like, because you're in a different time zone, you were like following the sun. And so you would hand off to someone and someone else would pick up. It's okay to blur the lines. It's about being clear about where we're blurring the lines and where we're not, right? So that people aren't like, I've just seen it so many times where everyone is picking up the same issues or people are just like aren't coordinating. Those are just easy things. Sorry, simple things, maybe not easy to fix, right?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Like, I think, as you say, a lot of these things are simple and not easy, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Often there's again, a quote I think I used in that talk. I can't remember the name of the guy. It was some French engineer or whatever who said that or engineer or designer, I can't remember which, but basically like a design is perfect not when there's nothing to add, but when there's nothing to take away, right? And that's like I think like that's often the thing sometimes where teams are like, well, why are we not able to kind of get momentum or speed or velocity or like get people doing things? And the solution is like, well, one more stand up, one more goal, one more like
Just keep
field
adding
on a
to it.
Jira
Yeah,
issue, whatever.
yeah.
Like, and it's like actually most of the time it's like the other way around. It's like, what is like, I guess I would encourage people, particularly on kind of little skunks work projects sometimes, to be like, what is the actual minimum amount of progress, status reporting, coordination, everything you can do? And then as you encounter problems, add them on bit by bit, right?
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
rather than starting from a position of like, well, let's do all of these things.
I think like also when I'm thinking about introducing process, right? I feel like process is a guardrail. It's a gap like filler between like where we are and where we need to be. So like if there is something that needs to happen in order to graduate the team to the next stage and it's not happening because humans can only human so much, you like put in a process to kind of like bridge them and help them. And my goal is to deprecate that bridge. I want us to graduate, get to the other side where that becomes either autonomous in terms of like the software taking care of it or autonomous in terms of like this is a learned behavior by our humans and therefore we don't need to put this process in place because it's like being done. And so we can graduate out of this and then we can go to the next one. I think like what we miss is we keep on adding on more and more processes and we don't take away, or we put in the wrong process. And so it's not something that we can accomplish and get past. But like, yeah, 100%. Like you were saying this before, like, I think sometimes a leader's job is to think about like the 40 things that are wrong and to be like, okay, cool. Some of these actually might go away on their own. Some of these like are actually underpinning and like fundamental ones that we need to fix. And like out of the four that we need to fix, this one's like going to be received the most well by the team. Let's do that one first. Let's see what changes out of my list of 40 and let's like go from there. And you just have to like tackle one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And like sometimes people are ready and sometimes people aren't. So like I'm an example for like one of the projects that I was managing. I would ask product, engineering, and design who they were blocked on. And they're all pointing to each other. Now, everyone can't be blocked on everyone. Someone's blocking someone, right? And the reality was that people were not communicating to each other on what they were blocked on. And so I was like, oh, I like hate to do this to you all. Actually, I love it. But like, it's time for a Gantt chart. And they were like, fuck you. You are not making me input this information into a spreadsheet. We don't need it. And I was like, bet, okay, let's give it 2 weeks. I will do nothing. Here's my prediction. I didn't even give it 2 weeks. I think I gave it 1 week. I didn't have the appetite for 2 weeks, but let's give it 1 week. Let's see what happens. This is my prediction. And if it goes the way that I think it's going to go, then we try it my way for 2 weeks. And if I can show you that I can improve this in 2 weeks, we can do it. And people hated me. It Our momentum went up. We started shipping more. People fucking hated the Gantt chart. And every single time they brought it up with me, I was like, would love to replace it with anything that you want. You make me a proposal. I will do anything that you want for 2 weeks. And if you can show me the same results, we'll move to it. Silence, right? They didn't like it, but it was working. And like, we eventually stopped using it, right? Like we didn't need to use it eventually. And I've told them the minute that like we can hit this milestone, I'll deprecate this and we don't have to use it anymore.
I feel like that's a really, I mean, you were talking about it about a spreadsheet, Gantt chart, whatever, but I feel like that's a really critical thing with keeping momentum, creating momentum or whatever is, I think we talked about this a little bit before, but like there's, this idea in open source land of like the person who does the work, gets to make the decision. And I think, again, similarly with what you've said there, in my mind, it's also applicable to if people can't reach consensus on what a plan is that we're going forward, like something is always favorable to nothing, right?
Yeah.
And I always try and be the one to be, sometimes it's me, sometimes I just pick another person's idea. Like, in fact, I had a friend who had a great hack for this, for those of us who've been to like tech conferences or whatever, where you have like a crew of like 20 people roaming the street looking for somewhere
Yeah.
to eat, and you're
Yeah.
all just hungry and no one can agree or whatever. So his hack to this was, he very, very strongly argues for everyone going to McDonald's, right? And no one wants to go to
To give
McDonald's.
people something to react to.
Exactly. So then everyone reacts against McDonald's, and it's like, I don't want to go to McDonald's. And then he finds that like you can get that alignment by
Yes.
forcing a decision in the other way. And like I've found myself doing that a bunch as well, of just being like, look, we need to move forwards. I think we should do X, right? And then people may or may not agree, but then at least we have a starting point or something to go forward with, or something to anchor off, or whatever.
Yeah, just, like, being willing to be the one that sounds stupid, the one that, like, just kinda drives a decision and be hated a little bit, but then, like, you can fix it, right? So, I feel like, having a clear scope, cutting scope, and being laser focused on it, and then also just, like, figuring out your next blockers and, like, getting at it and, like, knocking them down one by one to try to get the team to do, maximize their potential without getting them to overwork, right? I think is part of it. And we talked about like timing and sequencing. So I feel like then we switch into like, okay, maybe we have momentum. How do you keep it? Right. So do you have any like tips or tricks, or is there anything that like is your go-to for that?
Yeah, I guess I'm one of those people where, I guess, if we zero right in on engineering, where I'm just like very aggressively try to automate things, and
Hmm.
at least like automate things that I have to do more than once. Like if I have to do something more than once and it's annoying or error prone, or I see a bunch of other people do it or struggle with it, then I guess I'm just like, right, well, I'm going to automate that, right? So that we don't hit this speed bump in future. Because again, I guess like with open source land, I was, I guess, on some other podcast recently, and I was talking about like the inputs to open source, right? And you could say, well, the input is maintainers' time is the most constrained resource. And I thought about it a bit more, and I was like, actually, the real constraint is maintainers' motivation, right? Because even the
Yes.
time they have is flexible, right?
Yes.
And this doesn't map quite as well to those of us who are on like oh, my contract says I work 40 hours a week or whatever. But even within that, I think everyone knows like there's times where you feel more effective and times when you feel less effective, and times where you're procrastinating a little bit or staring at a wall or being like, oh, I don't want to do this. And like for me, like I try and be really sensitive when I'm working as an engineer on an engineering team to like those feelings and moments, and be like, well, other people are probably going to hit this too. Like if we have a flaky test that means that what should have been a 15-minute job now has become a 30-minute job, right? Then if every time you hit that, you go, and then like look out the window for 15 minutes, then like that sucks. And if when you hit that, you're like, well, we're going to deal with that. So the next person is not going to hit that, and they can kind of maintain their forward momentum. And as I say, I don't even think it's necessarily about saving time. It's about saving that like feeling that
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
this has
yeah.
kind of ruined my day or flow or whatever. And you can do the same thing with meetings and stuff as well. Like, so something I always tried to do at GitHub, and it was easier for time zones, is to like, I didn't particularly enjoy having back-to-back meetings, but I was like, well, I would rather have 4 hours uninterrupted coding time than 4 hours back-to-back meetings than have 30 minutes meeting, 30 minutes coding, 30 minutes meeting,
Right.
30 minutes coding. And it's just
Yeah.
a different way of carving up your day.
Yeah.
And like, again, arguably the kind of back-to-back meetings probably suffered from it, but like there's absolutely no way you'd get the same productivity if you were kind of interspersing it. Even if your day maybe felt a little bit
Yeah.
better, like it's
Yeah.
just paying attention to that stuff and being like, how can I move faster? And then sharing that with other people and being like, maybe you can do this and maybe you'll move faster this way as well.
Yeah. I think like motivation's a key piece. Pivotal because we were co-located, we were in person the same time. We had this like concept which I don't know who invented it, right? It's called a pain snake. And like if you remember, those of you who are older who are viewing, the game Snake, right? Where you like go and you eat the little food and then like you get longer and longer. The pain snake is for something that like annoys you, that like comes up on the team, every single time someone encounters that, they put a sticky note on next to that line, and then the snake grows, right? And so like we always had a threshold, whether it was like 3 sticky notes or 5 sticky notes, that at retro on Fridays, we would like go and look at the pain snakes. And then if something exceeded a certain threshold, then that became a ticket in the backlog to go address, right? And so it's like you can't address everything. Otherwise, we'll be in tech debt central and we'll just be refactoring our refactors, right? But at some point, if it's affecting motivation, then it's going to affect momentum, right? And so it's like, okay, cool. If 2 people encounter this, if 3 people encounter this, then like go fix it. Now you are someone who's like, I literally could probably fix this in 2 minutes and like it won't make a dent in my day. And so for those, obviously we want people to just like go and fix it, right? But if it's like something that's a little bit more arduous, right? Having that pain snake as like a way to say, is this just painful for me? Is this painful for everyone? How do we collect that information and like give power back to the engineers to be like, I hate this. And it's like, well, 4 people hated this. Let's go do something about it. Right. I like to use that as a signal to figure out what to tackle next. And I think also not every dip in motivation needs to be addressed. I think that projects have ebbs and flows. If you demand 120% energy every single step of the way, you will burn people out. And like, I'm not looking for maximum velocity. I'm looking for minimum volatility. I'm looking for predictability. And volatility being the change in velocity over time, right? I want it so that we're hitting 95% every single week. And I'd rather have that than 180% zero, 180% zero, right? Because that actually, that up and down, that roller coaster affects people more. And so if we've demanded a 120% week, you should expect an 80% week. And you can't push people for the 80% week unless that 120% happened, not out of necessity, unnecessarily, right? So sometimes I'll be like, okay, why is everyone going so hard? And they're like, well, we saw that the CEO had mentioned this in their like stand up. And so like we feel a lot of pressure. And I'm like, no, like we have our milestone, we have our fixed date, we're doing fine. Like if you are extremely motivated and you're the type of personality that you want to keep going and it'll make you unhappy to step away, fine, like do you. But otherwise, like how do we address this like stimuli that's increased the energy that's going to decrease the energy over time, right? And every team is different. So you have to like observe, you have to understand who the steady people are, who the peaky people are. And then you have to figure out, okay, cool, is this dip in motivation bad? And is this a bad sign or is this going to bounce back next week, right?
Yeah. I think motivation is such a kind of fascinating piece of all this because it's
Yeah.
so individual and so team based, and like it's not something you can kind of magically do. But again, I think going back to the principles you were saying earlier, I think you have to do all these little mini experiments on individuals and teams and be like, well,
Yes.
we're going to try
Play
change this one
around.
thing and
Yeah.
then see what happens. See if
Yeah.
this improves things or makes it worse. And if it makes it worse, then roll it back. And yeah, I guess the other thing I think about, and I'm probably going to use the wrong words, but there's also something about like for maximum velocity of a team, then you don't want to aim for like 100% efficiency. You don't want to get all the slack out the
Mm-mm.
system. There
Mm-mm.
was, not to during it was interesting, like during COVID, you saw like different countries in the world where there was, I can't speak about specifics, but I know certainly in the UK that, the NHS had been on a big like productivity drive for a fair few years. And as a result was running very, very like high in terms of efficiency of like no one's time is being wasted. Like everything's being used at capacity. And then you have like an unknown addition to the system like COVID, and then things went a bit off the rails. Whereas in some other countries where they kept things like, we don't want the hospital beds more than like 80% full, right? Rather than like we
Yes.
want them at like
Yes.
99.9% full or 100%
Yes.
full. Then these shocks to the system happen, and actually the overall throughput of the system is better because of that. And I feel it's the same thing with engineers. It's like, I guess like Google had that infamous ages ago, like 20%
Yeah.
time and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. And that is sort of somewhat like a relic of history at this point. But I feel like not even just engineering cultures, I would imagine pretty much any job, basically, you want to give people a certain amount of time for like self-improvement and like improving things for themselves and the team and whatever. And if you literally just never give anyone any of that, then you're probably just going to turn into unproductive sludge. And even though everyone's working really, really hard, then people feel like they're just not making progress. And I think that's the hardest thing to get around people, is that particularly sometimes if you've got a team that has, never had momentum for a while, is it's like you can come in and they can think that you're saying, hey, everyone needs to work harder. And it's like, no, you might need to literally do less work. There might be stuff you're doing right now that I just want you to stop, and that will make you go
Yes.
faster. And
Kill
that's
it,
really
right?
counterintuitive, right? And
Yes.
I think like that side of things, I guess I, I've talked a lot in the past, and I guess I was known for at GitHub for being like bad cop and saying no to things all the time. But like
Yes.
I've
You
always
literally
felt
have a
like,
blog post on it. Yeah.
and yeah, like I've always felt like that's a really big part of this stuff, is that like you have to, both as a leader, like an aspiring leader or an actual leader, you need to be willing to say no to things and enforce your boundaries and things. Otherwise, you just get deluged with like, well, I've said I'm going to do these 100 things by the end of the week, and then sometimes you can get literally nothing done because you're just so overwhelmed with having 100 things, right? Whereas if you say no to like 97 of them and you get 3 of them done, maybe you even get 5 of them done by the end of the week. You get more done, and you can go back to the person and say, hey, I said I wouldn't do this, but I've actually been
Yeah.
able to do that. But like,
Yeah.
I think you were really good at that as well, about like boundaries and saying no and stuff like that. And like, what was your approach to that with teams?
Okay. Well, I didn't phrase it necessarily as like I wanted to say no to everything. I think like so one, as I get to know a team, I'm talking to them individually. And like, I got this from Laura Hogan. She had me ask this question to one of my reports because I think she realized that we were so different and I didn't understand why they weren't motivated by the things that I was motivated by. And I talked to everyone individually and I ask them what gives you energy and what takes energy away from you, right? And if I can get to know everyone individually, sometimes it's like milestones, sometimes it's like hearing from customers or whatever it is, right? Now I have this bank in my head of like what's going to drive motivation and what's going to kill the motivation. So then I get my external requests in, right? And those are the things that I want to say no to. As a leader, I think it's really important to understand which fires to let burn. And a very simple example, right? Companies always going to be trying to do new things top down. And as they come top down, if you were the first one to adopt the new system, you are going to discover all the kinks in the system, and your folks are going to inherit more work than the next one. So it's really important for me to pick when I'm going to be an early adopter to a brand new process and when I'm going to be the last one to complete it, right? And what I'm going to be looking at is, how's the team doing? What's their velocity like? How likely are they going to be bogged down or like lose motivation if this goes wrong? And like, which fires do I let burn? And so saying no sometimes means not yet. And I don't know the right answer. Just like you said, I'm running experiments all the time. I am trying to figure out, okay, cool. We've got 86% week over week. I want to hit 87% without risking it going to zero. So, what do I want to try? What do I feel comfortable with? What am I willing to take a risk on? And like, no risk, no gain. So, okay, cool. I've been asked to do this. I'm going to go ask for a 1 week extension and just see how critical this deadline is, right? Oh, it's not critical at all. Actually, you gave 2 months lead time. I'm going to go take that 1 week, 1 month, 1 week extension. Sometimes I'll take it a step further and say everyone in engineering should get a 1 week extension, because I know that reviews are hitting at the same time as the big conference is hitting, at the same time as training is hitting. And so now this fourth thing is going to like do us under. I'll go advocate for an extension. Or sometimes I'm like, we've gotten extensions the last 3 times and like, it's time for us to do it. I'm going to go explain to the team, hey, I know you hate this. Here's why I didn't get an extension for you. Here's why you need to like swallow your medicine. Let's like go do it together. Let me figure out how to make this fun for you. Who wants to do a Zoom? Who wants to like live tweet this training and like we can all make jokes together? Let's like do a live showing, right? Like, how do I keep the momentum, the motivation up for things that we don't like to do? And how do I shove some things aside? There are other people who I've worked with who have much higher thresholds for fires than I do. I've learned a lot from them. If you're going to be really laser focused on your top 3 goals, there is going to be stuff that you let burn that is going to cause drama. And you really have to weigh the two. How good are the benefits of getting your top 3 versus the drama that you incur and the social capital you are consciously choosing to burn in order to get the top 3 done? And like, every CEO is doing this all the time, right? Like, as an individual, you'll look up to the CEO or a CTO or a VP, and you'll say, "How could you not see this as a problem?" And like sometimes if they feel like being authentic, they will be like, "Yeah, it's a problem." And what, right? Like it's not my top 3. And you can feel resentment for it, but you have clarity. And other times, they'll be actually doing the things that like align with your top 3. And it's just never always going to be aligned. It's about like letting the right fires burn.
I think like I like the fact you said authentic because there's a nice segue in that. Actually, we were
Mm.
asked on YouTube by Brandy Phelps, finally
Brandon.
someone, uh, oh yeah, Brandon. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't.
Brandon
I
Phelps.
read it
Yeah.
as Brandy N Phelps. There you go, lowercase usernames. We've been asked a question by someone who's not called Justin, which is great. Nothing against, no shade on Justin's. I'm going to paraphrase it slightly just for brevity. So they said you both have reputations for being authentic and candid. How did you do that? How do you promote that culture and avoid the downsides?
Yeah.
So I
I
guess,
think you first.
yeah, okay.
Sorry. Aggressive. You
No,
first.
no,
Go.
yeah. So, I mean, for me, I think the earliest part of it is maybe the fear side. I know that's maybe a strange thing to say, but I think the things that make people not authentic or not candid are often fear of consequences, right? And
Mm.
what will happen to me. And like sometimes those fears can be justified if you're in a really precarious financial situation. You have a job where it's like, the last 10 people who spoke out got fired, then yeah, okay, you don't have an environment or a culture
Yeah.
there that's
Read the
going to
room. Yeah.
reward that. But yeah, but I mean, thankfully I've been in most of my career either cultures that value that or situations where I'm like, if they don't value that, I'll go elsewhere and find someone that does. Um, so I guess for me, the starting point is just be like, okay, like let's be honest, right? Like let's try and speak the truth to people in power, people in my team who ask me, like people who ask me when they think something's going to be done. But then I guess we talked about the piece before in a previous podcast where I think for me, the important part has always been like, okay, well, how can I be as honest as possible, but yet also as kind as possible, right?
Yeah.
And I think the two go hand in hand because sometimes as well, like being dishonest is actually really unkind, even if phrased in very nice language. But basically, so I'm like, how can I communicate the thing that needs to be communicated? And
Yeah.
then, given I'm going to do that, how can I avoid hurting people's feelings as much as possible? And I guess to the second part of the question, like, how do you promote that culture? I think, like, as like a member of a team, I guess I try and encourage that in other people. I try and encourage people to ask those questions. And I guess, well, I guess it's probably the same as a leader, where like asking people those things, trying to tease that authenticity or candidness out of them and then praising and rewarding them when they do that. Or even just being like, well, maybe they'll feel more comfortable doing that privately one-on-one or in text to begin with, or on their pet topic to begin with, or whatever, before they want to do it in a group or an all hands or whatever. And then I guess the final point of like avoiding the downsides, like I actually ironically think there's many more downsides of not being authentic or candid than there is like upsides. But yeah, I guess for me, it's that thing of just being, again, we talked about this before. If you're willing to be like humble and apologetic and be honest when you screw things up, because yeah, again, being part of being authentic and candid is there's going to be times where you're like, this person can probably take some tough feedback. And it turns out they're having a really bad day or week or month or whatever. They couldn't take that. You've made them really upset. And in that situation, being like, hey, I'm really sorry. Like, it wasn't my intention to be upset. I fucked up. Like, I'll do better next time. Right.
Mm.
And I think if you're willing to do that, and if you're willing to genuinely try to build a relationship with people, say thank you, say sorry, then you can probably figure out all this stuff. How about you? What do you think now?
Yeah, I mean, like, my mantra, which is sorries and thank yous are free. So I feel like that's like a very big part of it. I think if we like wanted to drill down, I still don't know the answer to this. I think like I keep being told that I'm authentic and candid, and I don't 100% know. I only know how to be myself, and I keep on getting encouraged for what I'm doing, so I keep on doing it. I'm still trying to break that down, but I do think that a very big part of me being authentic is literally taking a step back and understanding how I think about something and like thinking 2 levels deeper, knowing actually how you feel and actually why things are the way they are and spending those extra brain cycles around it. So it's, I'll get a question that's like, hey, why does product keep on ignoring us when we say that we can't do this, right? And instead I could say, well, that's stupid, like product should just get on board. Or I could like really think deeply about the question and I could say, there's a lot of pressure top down, number one. And so like I think we should actually learn what the pressure is coming from. And like number two, I think that they don't fully understand what's going on this project, right? Let me give you a few examples. So like really trying to like get a good answer. And especially in writing, I try to use as plain language as possible. I'm very wordy, I'm very verbose, I'm very prosaic. And so I do a second pass and a third pass specifically for plainer language so that I'm more approachable, especially for language barriers. It's important to do that. So those are like some tactical things. But then how do I promote that culture? So very similar to you. One, role modeling. Two, responding well to people being authentic. And I like want to draw a difference between like some people are like, okay, cool. I like want to bring my whole self to work. And that means like in a Slack channel, I can like complain about my personal life for like 15 minutes and like get everyone involved. There's authenticity to it, but it's inappropriate for work, right? And so there's different versions of authenticity that really work. I think like being transparent about what you see and like showing curiosity and like wanting to drive to better solutions, that is what I want to award. And I want people to hear from me, thank you for contributing. Thank you for challenging me in a very good way, in a curious way. Thank you for asking this good question, right? All of those are positive reinforcements to like a good authentic culture. But authentic culture still needs to drive towards like a positive top right because especially in remote settings, in meetings, in Slack channels, you are putting words out there that affect everyone who's reading. And you have to be responsible with that. I reward good, responsible communication. And then what about the downsides? You kind of like hinted around this. And then I'm going to point out one thing that you do that maybe you didn't mention. I think you know that you do it, but I think it's like a very important piece of it. So, number one, you can't avoid all the downsides. It's about walking into it and taking that hit and saying this is worth it, right? You said the downsides of not having an authentic culture are worse than some of the downsides of saying something, right? And that's like taking the hit and saying this is worth it. You have to make a calculated risk. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe, and this is the part that I wanted to bring up, you don't have the social capital for it. One thing that you do, Mike, every single time, and I remember you doing this to me, and I was like, why is this man kissing my ass right now? Like, for what reason? When there's a new leader, you get to know them. You try to understand their motivating factors, and you build social capital. You try to figure out a way to solve a problem for them. You are building social capital proactively so that you can be authentic when you need to be authentic. And maybe it's conscious, maybe it's unconscious, but understanding that if someone hears from you the first time ever and it's a no, and it's like something challenging, is not going to go well. And like you need to find a way to say yes first. And if you don't have a relationship with that person yet, you need to create one and you need to find an opportunity to say yes first. And if that means doing something, solving a problem for them and like making something better, you have the yes first so that later when you say no or you challenge something, they understand the range of your personality and the range of your willingness. So you have to proactively build that social capital and you have to gauge your social capital if you're going to take a stance. And I know that no one wants to think about that, but like politics exists at work. Denise, you did a wonderful talk at Lead Dev. Hopefully it's up right now. That really talks about, gets into the depth of it and like makes that argument. I 100% agree, right? Like politics and social capital allow you to be authentic. So either you play the game or you are in the back seat of someone else who's driving them.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a really great question. Thank you, Brandon. That resulted in
Yeah,
a
that was
very
fun.
nice conversation for us. Yeah, we're going to go and do what we've done the previous few and update the minimal viable management GitHub repository based on what we've been talking about using our AI bot that does these things for us. But yeah, thank you for listening. And yeah, we'll see you next time.